What if one moment didn't just start a conversation, but confirmed everything people have been quietly thinking all along? Because right now, the discussion around Tisha has reached a point where people are no longer holding back. This isn't subtle criticism anymore, and it's definitely not a few scattered opinions. What we're seeing now is loud, direct, and unapologetically clear. And after that panel discussion, something shifted. The tone changed, the language got sharper, and suddenly what used to be speculation turned into full-blown conclusions. But here's where it gets even more interesting. This isn't just about one argument. It's about a pattern that people feel has been building for a long time. And now, for the first time, it's being called out without hesitation. When the panel began breaking down the situation between Tisha and Destiny, there was no confusion about where they stood. There was no careful wording or neutral positioning. They came in direct, and they made it very clear. In their eyes, Tisha wasn't just slightly wrong. She was completely off in how she handled the situation. And what made their perspective hit even harder was the way they described her behavior. Words like immature, insecure, and even chaotic were used, and they didn't feel random or exaggerated. Instead, they echoed what many viewers had already been noticing over time. That's what gave those words weight. This didn't feel like a sudden judgment. It felt like a conclusion that had been slowly forming and finally reached its breaking point. But what really amplified the situation was the contrast. Because while Tisha appeared intense, reactive, and determined to push her point, Destiny came across in a completely different way. She seemed calm, measured, and controlled. She allowed space, she listened, and she didn't immediately match the same level of energy being directed at her. And in moments like this, that contrast becomes everything. When one person is visibly emotional and the other remains composed, the audience instinctively begins to assign roles. One becomes the aggressor, the other becomes the grounded one. And whether that perception is fully accurate or not, it's powerful. It shapes how the entire situation is interpreted. This is where the conversation moves beyond just the surface. Because according to the panel, this wasn't just about disagreement. It wasn't even about who was right or wrong in that specific moment. It was about how Tisha approaches conflict as a whole. The way she reacts when challenged, the way she communicates under pressure, and the way she holds on to tension even when there are opportunities to de-escalate. That idea stood out strongly. It wasn't just that she disagreed with Destiny, it was that she seemed determined to continue arguing, even when the situation could have been softened. And that raises a bigger question that people are now asking. Was this about resolving anything, or was it about maintaining control of the moment? As the discussion went deeper, the panel introduced something that added another layer entirely. The idea that this behavior might not just be about the moment itself. Instead, it could be coming from something more personal, something that has been building over time. The word insecurity came up more than once, and it wasn't used lightly. It was framed as something that could be influencing how Tisha reacts, especially in situations where she feels challenged or exposed. And that idea connects to something many viewers have already sensed. Sometimes the strongest reactions don't come from what's happening externally, but from what's happening internally. And when those internal pressures reach a certain point, they show up in ways that are hard to hide. What makes this even more compelling is the contrast between how Tisha hasn't presented herself and what people feel they are now seeing. For a long time, she has appeared calm, controlled, and composed. That has been part of her image. But moments like this create cracks in that image. And once those cracks appear, they reveal something underneath that feels very different. That's what viewers are responding to. It's not just the argument itself. It's the sense that this moment exposed a side of her that had been hidden until now. And once something like that is revealed, it's very hard to ignore moving forward.
Another key part of the discussion centered around how Tisha handled her words during the argument, specifically the comment she made and then later tried to downplay. This didn't sit well with the panel, and it didn't sit well with many viewers either, because this is a pattern people recognize instantly. Someone says something hurtful in the heat of the moment, and when it's addressed, they minimize it. They make it seem smaller than it actually was, and that creates a difficult dynamic, because if the other person reacts, they risk being labeled as overly sensitive, but if they don't react, the comment goes unchallenged. That's why the panel described it as a form of manipulation, even if it wasn't intentional. The impact is what matters. There was also a strong focus on the idea of control. The panel suggested that Tisha's intensity may have been an attempt to take control of the situation. When someone feels uncertain or insecure, raising their voice or becoming more aggressive can feel like a way to regain that control. But the problem is, it often has the opposite effect. Instead of appearing strong, it can make someone seem less stable, and that's exactly what the panel believed happened here. Instead of gaining control, Tisha lost control of how she was being perceived. Meanwhile, Destiny's calm approach had the opposite effect. It made her appear more confident, more secure, and more grounded, even if she was feeling just as emotional internally. This moment feels like a turning point, not just for the situation, but for how both individuals are being seen moving forward. In reality television, a single moment can redefine everything. It can shift public opinion, reshape narratives, and influence how future actions are interpreted. For Tisha, this could become a defining moment, something that follows her beyond just this episode, because once the audience forms a strong perception, it becomes very difficult to change it. For Destiny, on the other hand, this moment may strengthen her position. It highlighted her ability to remain composed under pressure, and that kind of impression tends to stick. What makes this even more complex is how the audience is reacting. People are not neutral. They are choosing sides, forming opinions, and engaging emotionally with what they're seeing. Some strongly support Destiny, seeing her as calm and mature. Others still defend Tisha, but even among her supporters, there's often an acknowledgement that her behavior in that moment was difficult to justify. This division keeps the conversation alive. It fuels debate, encourages analysis, and ensures that the topic doesn't fade quickly. Everyone has a perspective, and that constant back and forth keeps the energy high. At the same time, viewers are starting to look beyond just this one scene and focus on the bigger picture. They're connecting patterns, linking past behavior, and using this moment as a reference point to understand everything that came before it. That's how powerful moments like this can be. They don't exist in isolation. They reshape the entire narrative. And once a pattern is identified, it becomes a lens through which everything else is viewed. That's why the situation feels bigger than just an argument. It feels like a confirmation. Of course, it's important to remember that what we're seeing is still only part of the story. Reality television shows edited moments, not full contexts. There are always details happening behind the scenes that viewers don't have access to. But even with that understanding, perception often becomes more important than reality. What people believe shapes how they respond. And right now, the perception is strong. It's clear, it's widespread, and it's not easily shaken. So now the real question isn't just about what happened, it's about what comes next. Will Tisha reflect on how she's being seen and adjust her approach? Or will this pattern continue and reinforce everything people are already saying? And will Destiny maintain that same level of composure in future conflicts? Or will new situations reveal a different side of her as well? Because if this moment has proven anything, it's that one scene can change everything, not just in the moment, but in everything that follows. And if this truly is part of a larger pattern, then this conversation isn't ending anytime soon. In fact, it might just be getting started.
What makes this situation even more compelling is how quickly narratives can evolve once the audience starts paying closer attention. Before this moment, there may have been mixed opinions, uncertainty, or even indifference towards Tisha's behavior. But now, people are revisiting past scenes with a completely different perspective. Moments that once seemed small or insignificant are being reanalyzed and given new meaning. It's almost like this situation has unlocked a new lens through which everything is being viewed. And that shift is powerful, because once an audience begins to reinterpret the past, it strengthens their belief about the present. It creates a sense of confirmation, making it feel like this outcome was inevitable all along. The longer that idea circulates, the more solid it becomes, and the harder it is for any new behavior to change that perception.